So I'm going to start this video with a thought experiment and a question. First, the thought experiment. What would Merrick Garland and Joe Biden have done differently if they wanted to make sure that Donald Trump avoided prosecution, the Epstein files were hidden, and Trump got another term? What would they have done differently? That's just something to think about. I don't know the answer. I don't know what I honestly don't know. I have my suspicions about Merrick Garland. I don't know about Joe Biden for sure. But the other question, this one's about Merrick Garland. Why is it we assume that he accidentally didn't prosecute Trump? Whenever this comes up, it's like, gosh, this guy was in over his head. But Merrick Garland was a federal prosecutor. If any attorney knows about tolling, knows that if you want to get your case in before the self-imposed deadline for elected officials, before the election, if you want to get your case in before your administration leaves and a new one, say a far-right ultra-nationalist regime might come in and not follow through on your civil rights case, nobody would know that better than a federal prosecutor. So Merrick Garland knew what he was doing every day that he served. So that's interesting to me, that we somehow imbue his actions with innocence or confusion. And that brings me to another question. Which kind of attorney general better serves a corrupt administration that wants to hide crimes of the elite? Crimes like wealthy men down in Florida raping poor little girls because they feel that they're special and that's what's owed to them. And politicians who get to be labor secretary hiding it because they think those men deserve to be free and to rape more little girls. So who's better prepared to hide crimes like that? A sycophant who says yes, sir, to everything, but in the end winds up spilling the beans, releasing more information than she intended to, and creating a public relations nightmare? Or would it be better to have an attorney general who is regarded as a judicial purist, who proudly proclaims that no man is above the law? And you just assume, oh, his voice is quavering because he's nebbishy and nervous. Maybe it's quavering because he's a fucking liar. Maybe that's why. Another thought. So which type of attorney general is better at hiding the kind of corruption where a rich man in Chicago can meet the right judge and fix his divorce case and abuse his children, and judges can become richer? Dirty, stupid, ineffective attorneys can become judges for committing crimes. Who is better at hiding something like that? A man who proclaims that nobody is above the law, while letting literally all of these elites remain above the law and beyond reproach. Or a former beauty pageant winner who was picked for her fealty, but manages to be tricked by everyone working in her administration, who have managed to leak what we know so far. There's been a lot in the news lately about wealthy, influential Republicans that Merrick Garland chose not to prosecute. In addition to Trump, there's Steve Bannon. He could have leaked the information about Musk long before Musk got government contracts. He managed to keep those things hidden. He protected wealthy, corrupt, evil Republicans. Merrick Garland did that. And like I said, we always have just assumed that he was just in over his head. He was the wrong man for the job. But what if it's because there was a detente? The wealthy, elite Republicans say to the wealthy, elite Democrats, you hide our secrets, we'll hide yours. And it works out for everyone, except those of us who are run over by this corrupt system. and those of us who have been literally classified as insane, forced into homelessness. I've lost everything because of this corruption. So you might be wondering why, besides Merrick Garland, I'm connecting the Epstein case to the judicial corruption case in Illinois. The major aspect to why people have called me insane officially is my talk about being provided protective surveillance. People don't believe that. It is what it is. But I think anyone who's an attorney, I assume, would look at what I'm saying. Well, I'm talking about a racketeering case, and under the Federal Witness Protection Act, there's specific rules, and people who participate in that program have to give consent. So that's been very confusing to me since 2022. I didn't understand, but my theory was always that for some reason there was an exception under national security law, which I don't say that aloud because when you've been forcibly committed to a mental institution, you try to avoid grandiosity, but it's just the only thing that could explain airplanes around my house every night in Chicago and things like that. I knew that after 9/11, if a certain judge could get, if an attorney, a prosecutor could get in front of certain judges with national security warrant requests, that a lot of secret things could happen. I don't know much more than that. So, and I could never understand why a judicial corruption case, even if it's the whole Illinois Judiciary, how you could classify that as national security. But then I started to think about the Epstein case. And in addition to Merrick Garland, one thing that ties together a case that investigates judges in Chicago selling judgeships and selling children, and the entire Illinois judiciary either benefiting from this or hiding this very corrupt and evil system. One thing that connects that to pedophile bankers and politicians is the Senate Judiciary Committee. And specifically, Senator Dick Durbin has been on that committee, if not heading it, the entire time Merrick Garland has been involved with these cases or serving as AG. And it was also Dick Durbin who brought Merrick Garland to Obama as a nominee. As a side note, I think if the amount of corruption I suspect Dick Durbin is implicated in comes forward, I think going forward we might think about whether we choose attorney generals and Supreme Court justices who are recommended by people on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who, when those people are the only people in the nation with legal and investigative authority over the individuals recommending them. But Dick Durbin and Merrick Garland share more than Durbin nominating him. He grew up in the town next to mine, the town where Michael Bender lives, the guardian ad litem who is a patron in the Cook County machine, who sold my children, my child custody, and awarded a judge who defrauded me, Judge Bradley Trowbridge, with a judgeship. So Merrick Garland grew up in the town next to me where the corrupt GAL in my case lives, Michael Bender, and Dick Durbin, the shady senator who headed the Senate Judiciary Committee for years while it was not exposing the corruption in Illinois, is also the one who picked Merrick Garland. So then I thought, one thing I haven't talked about here is my first arrest, and it kind of connects to Merrick Garland. And this was the summer of 2023. It was shortly after warrants were served on Mar-a-Lago, and I was staying at my friend's trailer in Iowa. it was Grinnell, Iowa, which is a college town, but the environment in Iowa was very pro-Trump at that time, and I think that they were pretty anti-FBI. And at the same time, I had issues with some women who were staying in the trailer next to where I was staying. Like I said, my friend owned the trailer park, so I had stayed there with him before when we would go there and work on trailers together. And I was working on like renovating trailers kind of in exchange for rent. And I also helped out with like the groundskeeper and stuff. So I knew that these two women were staying there who didn't live there. And that wasn't an issue. It was just that every time I would come outside, they would come out with iPads and film me. Or they would come out and do like yard work, which is weird because they didn't live there and the landlord does the yard work. So I believed they were members of law enforcement. I still do. That's a known thing that I think about some people. And I got really drunk one night. I was sitting there because I'd had a bad court case, and I knew that I wasn't going to have a hearing with a possibility of seeing my kids for like another 5 months. So I was really angry. I felt these women next door were involved in that lawsuit. And so I didn't want to see them. And I had to take my dog outside to pee. And when I was out back, the women came back. And I said something I regret. I took their picture and I said, referring to people who in Iowa who don't like FBI, I said, I'm going to give your picture to people who want to fucking kill you, which I don't. I'm a nonviolent person, so I don't want to invoke violence. I shouldn't have done that. I don't think I committed a crime because I think these women were harassing me and I was drunk. But anyway, nothing happened. But I was getting angry because I wasn't going to see my kids for months, and I was already issued my federal whistleblower numbers. I knew the case was being investigated because I was constantly surrounded by cops like these women. So I got pissed, and I'm very liberal. I usually post very liberal things, but I decided to try a conservative post. And I use conservative language, kind of like, because we usually say Democratic Party. And conservative people usually say Chicago Democrat Party. So I just wrote, Merrick Garland is hiding corruption in the Chicago Democrat Party or Cook County Democrat Party. And I was arrested that night. So I took the post down. Maybe it was a coincidence. But that was back when I was just blind to wanting to see any other truth than that Merrick Garland and everyone at the FBI was working to build a case against the people who were hurting me and my kids. I needed to believe that, so I lied to myself, even though it was really obvious that Merrick Garland wasn't going to help me. And I just told myself different reasons, like, oh, well, the election's too important, so after the election, my case will be made public because it involves Democrats. And then Trump comes into power. And all we find out is that they all hide each other's crimes. So if you're new to this channel, I'm just going to quickly go through the timeline, well, as quickly as I can, because it's 9 years or 10 years of when I started becoming embroiled in a corruption case in the most corrupt court in the most corrupt city in the nation, the Domestic Relations Division of the Circuit Court of Cook County, Illinois, Chicago Divorce Court. And but this is a case about rape of female staff and mothers, the selling of child custody, and the selling of judgeships. But I didn't know that in 2016 when I left my ex-husband, Peter Matt, who is a German national on a green card. That just makes a difference because federal laws became involved in my family, which matters in a corruption case. So 2016 was the first time I appeared in a Chicago divorce court, and his shady attorney was trying to say my ex-husband was this breadwinner who was earning all this money, and I was trying to destroy this profitable business. And I, for the first time, stated that my ex-husband has millions of dollars overseas that he chooses not to report to the federal government. He also doesn't report it to the court, except when he's suing me for damaging the reputation of the businesses. He doesn't report to the court. And that's a crime. He commits FBAR violations. He commits wire fraud and money laundering when he repatriates the money that he doesn't pay taxes on and that he hides. So Peter knew that, I knew that, and the judge knew that because she sealed it, and my divorce case was assigned to a favorite presiding judge, Grace Dickler, who headed the division. In 2017, a mother reported to the Illinois Bar Ethics Committee, the ARDC, that Illinois attorney and guardian ad litem, or GAL, David Pasulka, he said that if she ever wanted to see her children again, she should be smart and have sex with him. And she didn't, and he took her children away. And David Pasulka went on, allowed to take children away and rape mothers for another 3 years before he was arrested. That same year, around that time, clerk of the court Dorothy Brown was placed under FBI surveillance for issues with the clerk's filing software and a suspected pay-for-job scheme. And in 2017, I was divorced. And I entered into a parenting plan. And this is what's really crazy, because that was 9 years ago, and there was never a new case started. Like 5 years after a divorce, I guess 2022, Peter or I could have started a motion to change the parenting plan, but nobody ever started a case. Judge Johnson, Robert Johnson, terminated my parental rights without a case. That's why I can't appeal it, because I can't appeal it until my case ends. And my case ended in 2017. And since all the extrajudicial orders can't be appealed until my case ends, and my case hasn't started, my case will never end. I call this the dystopian clusterfuck. But after I was divorced, my ex-husband began a pattern of vexatious litigation. He would just sue me to cause me financial pain, to try to keep me. A lot of times I couldn't have a car. I could barely afford rent. But in 2018, my finances did begin to go up because I was recruited by Morgan Stanley to be a financial advisor, a stockbroker. So I started a new career. And that same year, Judge Raul Vega, who had overseen my divorce, was removed from the bench. He had a habit of sexually harassing women. I was told I always had to wear short skirts and show cleavage and scream at people. He definitely screamed at me. And because he was so unfit to be around mothers, his good friend, presiding judge Grace Dickler, promoted him to presiding judge of the domestic violence division, because that way he wouldn't have as much contact with other mothers. But a few years later, he said something boorish to another judge on a phone call, and he had to resign right away. So that's how judicial corruption works. Because when Judge Vega was like screaming at people or kicking a female attorney out because he thought she was ugly or she was wearing pants, he wasn't doing that alone, like in his chambers. He was doing that in a family court at a status hearing. There are like 20 people at an open motion call. So when you're being sexually harassed by a judge, there's like 20 people. Sometimes they're literally a lawyer from your church's Peace and Justice Committee sitting there watching you get harassed and mistreated in court. But if they do one of those things one time to a judge, because judges matter, they lose their job. That's what corruption means. Some people matter and some people don't. But some people in America still think they're not living in corruption. So then in 2019 is when Michael Bender came into my life. He was appointed. I didn't want him as a guardian ad litem. His fees have bankrupted me, and I can't discharge them in a bankruptcy. I have $2,000 a month garnished, even though I'm homeless and I haven't been employed. If I get a job, they take $2,000 before I get to take anything. But at the time, I really thought at some point real justice would kick in and it would stop. I didn't know it would get to this. But I did hire a lawyer to have Michael Bender removed, and that was Brad Trowbridge, and he defrauded me. I didn't know at the time. I just thought he messed up or maybe had a drug problem, because it was the summer of 2020. A lot of people messed up. Now, 2020 is when we thought that Me Too came to Chicago, because finally David Pasalka was arrested for not only raping mothers by threatening to take their child custody. It was revealed that for 20 years he led the secretive committee that picks GALs. And David Pasalka was Michael Bender, my GAL's law partner. And so Pasalka was arrested. And after he was arrested, Grace Stickler decided he couldn't be a GAL. That's how it works. And that same summer, 28 female attorneys wrote a letter to presiding Judge Grace Stickler complaining of rampant sexual abuse in the office of the clerk. This was after Me Too, so we thought it would bother people. And they complained of male judges in particular sexually assaulting female employees, including rape in the courthouse. And nobody did anything, including Grace Stickler, including the Department of Justice. So after a lawyer named Brad Trowbridge defrauded me, we had another costly appointee called a parenting coordinator named Dr. John Palin. And he accidentally copied me on an email soliciting a bribe. And then he was involved with my ex-husband. He ordered me on behalf of the court to allow Peter to make our developmentally disabled 13-year-old son, who couldn't consistently count to 10, CEO of Peter's company, so that they could get contracts set aside for disabled-owned businesses from IBM. That was his biggest client. And then Peter put in the business plan, because to be certified as owned by a disabled person, you have to pretend that this person is paid and has the highest shares, like an actual CEO. But Peter put in the plan that not to worry, it was just fraud. He would keep Angus, our son's pay, and he would keep his shares. So just so we know, it was fraud. Did you know that's a specific form of child abuse to involve a minor in a financial crime? I think it's usually more for like panhandling, but I read that in Illinois. But our Illinois parenting coordinator ordered me to let him do that. And of course, Judge Johnson knows all of this. He knows about Peter's financial crimes. That's kind of the whole point. Obviously, after seeing an email from a parenting coordinator asking for a bribe, obviously I was suspicious. And because Judge Johnson and the GAL always agreed with my deranged ex-husband, who's rich, yeah, I was suspicious. But it seems absolutely bonkers to accuse someone of actual judicial corruption in the 2020s, because digital banking records, I didn't think until my sons were being involved, that was when I realized that the funds to bribe someone like Michael Bender would easily go through a child's trust or even business vehicles. So whereas family court records, there's a lot of opacity in some areas, but there's a record that people can see. Trust documents can often be very secretive. So that's a very good way to pay someone a bribe. They're good ways to launder money in. Rich OPA giving gifts to disabled relatives, for example, and then get money out. You know, those fees going to guardians and attorneys, all sorts of important ways to pay people. So then I realized that was how Peter was bribing people. I decided to test Judge Johnson. I filed, a mountain of evidence showing Peter's financial crimes, because I knew that Judge Johnson has at least as much training about anti-money laundering from law school is I got working at a bank. So if I know enough to send him to prison, and if when I ultimately became an IRS whistleblower, had counsel for Jeffries, the bank I worked for, Michael Sharp, he said, yes, the information you gave the IRS is enough to have your ex-husband sent to prison. So if he knew that, Judge Johnson knew that too. But he didn't rule against Peter, he ruled against me. And that's how I knew that I was fucked. So I went to my progressive church. I tried to get someone to help me as a civil rights victim, not just a divorce case, because divorce lawyers weren't helping me. I'd already spent a couple $100,000 on divorce lawyers, and this is the situation I'm in. So maybe not a couple, felt like it, at least 100,000. So, but maybe it's what I've owed according to the court. So then I knew to be very suspicious, and the lawyers at my church thought I needed a divorce lawyer, and when I was talking to them, that was when I found out what a docket is. And when I found out what a docket is, I went and looked at mine, and I just found voluminous evidence of fraud. And so this was on top of what I'd heard about federal prosecutors. I knew I would eventually learn Dorothy Brown, the clerk, was under surveillance, and someone had gone into the clerk's e-filing software, which was part of what she was under surveillance for, changed my mailing address while my lawyer was hiding court dates so they could orchestrate a contempt filing. So I thought, I have obvious financial crimes, and which court officials are participating in, and there's like evidence for an existing case. I tried to go to the Chicago FBI. I tried 2 times to go in person in the summer of 2021. It was closed for COVID. And I tried to call, email, and 6 times I made efforts, and nobody was getting back to me. So then both of my sons were complaining about their dad hitting them, and because of my financial background, I thought, well, I'll just go to the IRS. So I filed an IRS criminal whistleblower complaint, and talked to, in addition to Michael Sharp, I had disclosed the same crimes to my compliance officer at Morgan. So when I say my ex-husband's a financial criminal, it's literal. And then I was issued 2 whistleblower numbers. So I knew I was right about the corruption because I had 2 cases. And that was January of 2022. And I thought the cavalry was coming in to rescue me, and that nothing would happen with my boys, but I was wrong. So in January 2022, at the time, I wasn't sure if it was a coincidence or not. Now I'm certain it wasn't. Once I saw that Judge Johnson was dirty, I just thought, well, I'll file a motion to substitute him. Then another judge will see him being dirty. I'm pragmatic. I know it's Chicago. I thought maybe it would be handled quietly. My case would be transferred, and I'd get away from Judge Johnson. But then my case was, I filed a motion to substitute Judge Johnson, and I had 2 reasons. One, to this day, Judge Johnson and his clerk, Kay Mason, keep a secret email thread with my name and case number involving my ex-husband's attorney and Judge Johnson, and not me, and that's called ex parte. So on the face of it, that's reason for him to not be my judge. And the second one was, well, it's happened 3 times. When I filed my SOJ, I only knew 1. I knew only about 1. Judge Johnson, when my ex-husband's attorney has held fraudulent hearings where I'm not in attendance, so they can find me in contempt without me knowing. The way they do this is Judge Johnson enters an order allowing me to appear pro se, even if I'm not aware. And he's done that 3 times. So I thought fraudulent pleadings against me demonstrated bias. But my case was assigned to Matthew Link, who was an attorney for the city of Chicago, who worked closely with Alderman Ed Burke, who is, I think, in prison now for corruption. And I knew when it was assigned to him, I'm like, well, I'm a whistleblower, so maybe they just want to see if they can catch this guy who's associated with Ed Burke. I thought maybe after that they'll arrest people and I'll get my kids and I'll be safe. So I was issued my whistleblower numbers in January, and then in February, that was the first weird thing, and I just thought I was a Nancy Drew for like discovering things. So in February, this letter was presented to the court. They said it came from a Dr. Gerald Bleckman, who had also participated in fraud, and he had hidden reports my younger son made of child abuse by their dad. Dr. Bleckman supposedly wrote this letter to the court that all of it was my testimony to Judge Link about Judge Johnson. So the letter from Dr. Bleckman was my ex-husband writing an email where he wrote my testimony, and then my testimony was reason to terminate my parental rights. And I just thought that was a coincidence that that I was stumbling upon retaliation for my testimony. But then, eventually I realized it's because they were building a racketeering case around me. So I'm just hoping every day that something's going to happen, or that some journalists will get back to me and realize I'm telling the truth. And I tried to file a federal civil RICO case because I knew I was a civil rights victim, because I knew that, if you commit to fraud against a client, things like that. During my research at the law library, I realized I had like a color of law where somebody under color of law deprives you of your civil rights. And usually they're police brutality cases. They're never against judges. But I didn't want to win a lawsuit. I just wanted an injunction getting out of this corrupt court. So that was why I filed a federal complaint. I'm not turning down a lawsuit. I'm just saying I didn't think I could win one. I did think I could get an injunction. But then after 3 attempts, technically it was dismissed without prejudice, so I could file again. I realized there was a criminal case, so my civil case wasn't going to get me out of a court because they wanted me to be bait for more crimes. So then after I became a whistleblower and Judge Johnson knew, he imposed so much child support on me. That's why there's the $2,000 garnishment. I lost housing in Chicago. I lived for a while in my friend's trailer park, living the dream. So then again, when I'm living in Iowa, I get my hopes up because finally my reels start getting some traction. Although Instagram, Meta, they just hate women. So domestic violence profiles always get shut down. And sometimes you're like, oh, am I shadow banned or do I suck? But Instagram specifically, only on the topic of my case, which is about civil rights, domestic violence, child advocacy, family court, judicial corruption, whatever. That's all my reels on this channel are about. And whenever I've had traction, reels that get to 6 figures, Instagram will literally close down my account for a week. So I can't comment or post or engage. So that dies down. And so that's what I mean by a shadow ban. I don't know how other people's shadow bans work, but it's only for and they'll say things like that I'm buying things or doing things that I don't do. I'm very lo-fi. So Meta sucks. I don't know why I got to talk. Oh, because then in the summer of 2023, I started meeting other people on Instagram when Instagram wasn't shadow banning me. And I learned about other moms like me. I learned about Catherine Kasanoff, who was in a very similar situation and ended her life. And we hoped that it would get people to talk about it. And it did a little bit, and then it just didn't. And then Reem Al-Salem, who was a UN rapporteur for studying violence against women and girls. She published a report exposing a global crisis in family courts. And at that same time, in Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, officially, the Department of Justice identified family court in situations like mine where children accuse a parent of abuse. Family courts often give the children to the abusive parents, as they did in my case. And so we all got hopes up. I assumed my case would be first because I had a corruption case, and if nothing else, my ex-husband was dead to rights for tax crimes. But that didn't happen. It's frustrating as my life has declined materially over like the last 4 years. Like, it just you rapidly move into more and more just shitty situations. So then you're like, gosh, I must be really bad at making choices, but you have so many bad choices. So like, this guy in Iowa, when I say he was a friend, he was my ex-boyfriend. I wasn't dating him for like a year before that. And when I'd been dating him like the whole time, he had said that he was not married. He wasn't a very good boyfriend. And then I found out while I'm living in this trailer that he actually was married, and I was pissed off because he's the only person I ever dated. I introduced my kids and my family, and he lied to me. So I said something. I told him I didn't want to talk to him because I found out he was married, even though I was still working on the trailer and stuff. And so he evicted me into an Iowa winter. And then I stayed with a deacon at my woke church, and then she and her husband had a window in my bathroom where they would sometimes stand when I was in there naked, and that was weird. So I freaked the fuck out. So then I went to North Carolina. The reason being I was homeless, and I figured it would be warmer to sleep in my car. And I had read the book Look Homeward Angel, so I wanted to go to Asheville. And I liked it, so I stayed there for a while. So then while I'm in North Carolina, my ex-husband gets permission from the court to take our kids to Germany. So essentially I don't have any more parental rights. And I lived there for a while. And then I make my way north because my storage unit is about to be auctioned off. So first time I get in, and it's auctioned off, I lose everything, but I tried. And then I try to work, and I have a master's in early childhood education, so I teach Head Start. So much money is garnished that again I can't. I'm homeless, so I'm living in a cabin on some land that my family owns. Well, technically my brother and I own it. My mother wants to own it. So then I lose my job at I can't pay rent, and I can't work, and Merrick Garland leaves office without anyone being arrested. And then I wonder if my case will just go away because Trump is very pro-corruption. But the new year starts and the inauguration, and there's still very, very many U.S. Marshals or whoever they are around me all the time. So I know they're still investigating. Then I yell at one of them, and I get locked up for 7 months. I've talked about that already. And then I got out of jail, and I find out there's still the garnishment, and there's a criminal background check now. I don't think it's from the yelling at the cop, because that is just a misdemeanor. They allowed me to plead no contest because I didn't assault anyone. But I pled no contest and got time served for misdemeanor assault, because I think the sentence for that was 2 weeks and I got 7 months. So now I'm out, and I don't even know to what extent there is a Department of Justice. I really want to know what Merrick Garland was doing, what he knew about the Epstein case, and what he knew about my case. And how come all these powerful, corrupt, toxic systems have been protected and hidden by the people who say, no man is above the law. It's a lie. And why do we keep letting them perpetuate this lie? Why aren't they held to account? And look what Merrick Garland's doing now. He's selling access to the institutions he protected. He's not at a think tank. He's not Professor Garland upholding some holy mission. He's getting paid. He's getting paid good.